Good day, I'm Tom Costello in for Hallie. We start this hour with breaking news. Former President Donald Trump speaking right now in New Jersey. There's a live shot for you. It is his second news conference in just a few weeks, and we're going to dip in live when he begins taking questions. We'll monitor it closely. This is part of an effort to paint a distinct contrast between his own campaign and that of Vice President Harris's. And his camp is hitting her hard on her limited availability so far for press conferences and interviews with the press. The former president's allies and advisors have been trying to get him to focus on policy rather than personal attacks, but things haven't really been going that way. Just yesterday, Trump was in North Carolina delivering a speech that was supposed to focus on his plans for the economy. But he ended up going on multiple tangents, attacking President Biden, who he's no longer running against, and also windmills. When he did get around to talking about Vice President Harris, the remarks seemed personal, calling her crazy and stupid. His words. It comes as the stage is now set for a VP debate. Vice presidential nominees Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance agreeing to meet October 1st. They will be on CBS. NBC's Monica Alba is in Washington. Monica, what will... Quickly, let's just talk about what we're seeing here right now from President Trump.
Well, I think, Tom, it's notable that in the last couple of weeks, the former president has said he's going to be doing more events like this. Oftentimes in the last couple of years, when he has said he was going to be holding a press conference, it meant sometimes that he would just speak and not necessarily take questions. But we did see him last week down at Mar-a-Lago take a handful of questions about the state of the race. And he denied that he was really shifting any kind of strategy now that Vice President Harris is at the top of the Democratic ticket. But I think you can see there today, based on what he's trying to talk about when it comes to the economy, that he is trying to focus perhaps a bit more on some of the policy perspectives and some of that conversation, even though he's coupling all of that. It's almost like there's one sentence that's written for him about his economic message, and then the next sentence out of his mouth is a personal attack on the vice president. He has insulted her intelligence. He has been talking a lot about these unfounded claims that somehow President Biden will change his mind and decide to come back to the 2024 race as a candidate, which we know is not the case and is not true. But he is trying to really train his focus today on the issue of inflation. And that's why you see behind him and off to the side, he has household and grocery items on display. And he's been talking about things like the price of cereal or various snacks or milk or eggs, and really framing that and trying to argue that this is something that has been the result of the Biden-Harris administration and their policies, which we should point out just in the last couple of days, there has been news to show that inflation is slightly cooling, at least to a point where the numbers seem to be heading in the right direction. But the former president is not necessarily putting it into that context. He's still talking about how things are very high when you go to the grocery store, when you go to fill up your gas tank. And really, when you talk to a lot of voters, that's exactly how they feel, too. So the former president is trying to tap into that sentiment, even if the data may be reflecting something different. Clearly, many Americans are still struggling with that and still say when they're polled that that's a big issue. Yeah. And in terms of some of those polls, Tom, many voters actually say they do believe that Donald Trump would handle the issue of the economy better. That is why Vice President Harris is now under pressure to release more of her details about an economic plan and proposal, which she is set to do tomorrow in North Carolina.
Yeah, it is important to note that this has been a global problem with inflation. Europe is still experiencing higher inflation, of course, than the United States, and a lot of the roots trace all the way back to the supply chain crisis. But let's go to Dasha Burns. She's keeping a close eye on the Trump campaign for us. And Dasha, what are we hearing from the president right now?
Well, look, Tom, there's the reality of how economics works, an example that you just gave there, and then there's the politics of it. And the Trump campaign knows that he has been polling very well on the economy, even as the race has tightened, as Vice President Harris has moved to the top of the ticket. His numbers are still better on the issues, particularly of the economy and immigration. And that is what you see him really leaning into today. This is a speech focused on the economy, but he's already drifted into talking points on immigration as well, really coupling those two issues where he feels he's strong. He's using props. He is focusing on policy. He's doing it in his own Trump way, sometimes on script, sometimes off, as we are accustomed to. But last night, when we talked at his speech in North Carolina, and we're talking about what he's presenting now, and I'll say this is more of a focus on the issues over the personal attacks, though the personal attacks certainly do continue to slip in there. And it's clear that he is frustrated that this change has happened, that his campaign has to now adapt to spend money in a different way, create a different strategy. The public posture for the Trump campaign is that the fundamentals of the race have not changed, that Harris inherits the same problems that President Biden had. However, she is a different candidate. She's younger, she's a woman of color, and she brings a new energy to the Democratic Party, bringing big crowds, which you've seen him lash out over as well, questioning her crowd size, which of course is unfounded. So it's a different dynamic now, and you see him and his team try to adapt to that and start to listen to what some of his allies have been saying, both publicly and privately, which is focus on the issues, focus on the policy contrast, tie Harris to Biden, Tom.
And, you know, we're also hearing that Trump could hold more outdoor rallies. Of course, we know what happened about a month ago or so in Pennsylvania with that assassination attempt. What sort of measures are being put in place now to make sure that that doesn't happen again, or that they mitigate the risk?
Yeah, so we're just getting some of this reporting, some coming from our colleague Kelly O'Donnell, saying that two sources familiar with the planning are saying that U.S. Secret Service will now use ballistic glass for protection so that the former president can resume doing those outdoor rallies that's typically used for the president when the president is traveling around the country. The former president will now have that glass. Secret Service will be responsible for taking care of and transporting it and setting up that glass in those sort of outdoor scenarios where it might be necessary, given issues like line of sight, anything that might potentially compromise his safety. And the former president, by the way, Tom, had said that he intends to rally once again in Butler, Pennsylvania, the site of that attempted assassination later in the campaign cycle.
Dasha, thank you. Monica, we heard from President Biden and Vice President Harris just a few hours ago talking about a huge price cut to prescription drugs for anybody on Medicare. So that could be disabled Americans, retired Americans, and there are the numbers right there. They affect medications for blood thinners, as you see, as well as diabetes, as well as rheumatoid arthritis, blood cancers, heart failure, etc. It's a list of 10 widely prescribed drugs. I'm just wondering now, as we see these two together, the vice president took the stage to begin, right? She was trying to grab some of that limelight, but mostly, for the most part, this was a Biden accomplishment, though she cast the vote that broke the tie.
Exactly, Tom. And this was really an official event in their capacity as president and vice president, talking specifically about the legislation that made this possible on the almost anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act. But it is absolutely impossible to divorce it from the politics of this as well. And certainly, while the vice president was there, this was a crowd in Maryland that was very appreciative of the president's service. There were a lot of chants of "Thank you, Joe," and a lot of things that then the vice president herself echoed. And it was clear that she was trying in that moment to praise his leadership and to talk about the work that they have been able to do together in terms of their administration. And they really are touting this, which is very, very significant, for millions of Americans that use these drugs, that some of which are just astronomically priced. For them to be able to see a reduction in cost will be very meaningful, but we should note it's still a couple of years away. This is a long process that Medicare needs to negotiate with these drug companies, but it's something certainly that will mean a lot to a lot of people. And we know that first list, that first group of those drugs will be included, and then there will be more to come, they hope. And so this is something about Vice President Harris also trying to put this in the context of, if I win the White House, here are all the other things I will try to do to lower everyday costs for Americans. And the president really tried to put this in the context of, you shouldn't have to choose between what you can spend at the grocery store to put food on your table and to get the necessary medication you need for your life. So this was a moment for the two of them to appear together. It's the first time they're together in this kind of setting since the president decided to drop out of the 2024 race last month.
Yeah, the prescription drug price cuts, of course, all part of the Inflation Reduction Act. 10 drug cuts now, possibly 15 more coming in 2017. And it's the first time ever that any White House has negotiated directly, allowed Medicare, rather, under this law to negotiate directly with drug companies. Ladies, thank you. Your expertise is always valued around here. We have more breaking news coming out of Los Angeles. Federal prosecutors have charged 5 people in connection with the deadly overdose of Friends star Matthew Perry. They are Perry's personal assistant, Kenneth Iwamasa, a drug dealer dubbed the ketamine queen, 2 licensed doctors, and an acquaintance of Perry. Investigators have been trying to track down the source of the ketamine that Perry used before he was found floating face down in a hot tub last October. At a press conference today, the U.S. attorney based in Los Angeles read out damning text messages from one of the doctors. Take a listen.
They distributed approximately 20 vials of ketamine to Mr. Perry in exchange for $55,000 in cash. Defendant Placentia saw this as an opportunity to profit off of Mr. Perry. He wrote in a text message in September 2023, quote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay."
Wow. NBC's Steve Patterson is joining us now from Los Angeles. Those are damning text messages, Steve. What are we learning about the roles that these 5 people allegedly played in Matthew Perry's death, and how much potential jail time could they face?
It makes you sick to hear those text messages read aloud, and you would think that would come from somebody called the Queen of Ketamine, yet it comes from licensed medical practitioners, people that had to take an oath in order to get the MD near their name. I have a 34-page federal indictment sprawled out in front of me. In this document, there are so-called 78 overt acts that prosecutors say led directly to Matthew Perry's death. There are distribution messages. There are injection dates and times. There are notes about how to cover it all up. All of this leading to 18 counts, including the most serious, the distribution of ketamine, resulting in death. Of those 5 defendants, 2 of them are facing very, very serious jail time. The Queen of Ketamine is looking at life in prison. That doctor, the one quoted reading those text messages, looking at 100+ years behind bars. All of this, I think, meant to show the seriousness and the serious disregard for life that is inherent in some of this, the messaging, some of the documentation that we see in the criminal complaint, and heard from prosecutors. They want to push to the fullest extent of the law, and they want to do it by using this high-profile case to show that we will not suffer the distribution leading to death in this country. Tom?
But, you know, Steve, it occurs to me this also was occurring at the same time that Matthew Perry was pushing his book, in which he talked about his journey, his struggle to be sober, to remain sober, and he claimed at the time he was sober, right? How is Perry's family reacting to this news today?
You know, and I think part of that, it was something that prosecutors want people to latch on to as well, that he obviously had fallen maybe off the wagon a bit, and that these people, including 2 medical professionals, including somebody that should be his friend and assistant, including people that knew him, instead of trying to pick him back up and put him on the wagon, further exploited him for money. We've heard from Perry's family, including the Morrison family. Obviously, correspondent Keith Morrison with Dateline was Matthew Perry's stepfather. The Morrison family and the Perry family are one and the same. They sent us a message saying, quote, "We were and still are heartbroken by Matthew's death, but it has helped us to know that law enforcement has taken his case very seriously. We look forward to justice taking its course, and we're grateful for the exceptional work of the multiple agencies whose agents investigated Matthew's death. We're hoping the unscrupulous suppliers of dangerous drugs will get the message." I think prosecutors are hoping to do the same. Tom.
Steve, thank you so much for the breaking news, and keep us updated. We appreciate it. We are tracking the path of destruction from Hurricane Ernesto as it makes a beeline for Bermuda. Take a look at all the water overflowing the dams in Puerto Rico. They are still cleaning up after the storm skirted past the island yesterday as a tropical storm. But man, that's a lot of water. Hundreds of thousands lost power, and today about a quarter of the island still in the dark. It's now a Cat 1 hurricane, and forecasters are warning it could turn into a Category 2 when it reaches Bermuda. Winds expected to clock in 85 miles per hour. Ernesto is threatening to stir up dangerous surf, could drop a whopping 12 inches of rain. Officials are urging people to prepare before it's too late.
I cannot stress enough the importance of completing your hurricane preparations immediately. For those who have not yet done so, I urge you to act now. Time is running out.
NBC's Stephen Romo and Angie Lastman are tracking all of this for us. We'll get to the forecast with Angie in just a moment. First, though, Stephen Romo is in Hamilton, Bermuda. And, Stephen, what's the situation like where you are right now? And are the folks there heeding the warning to prepare and maybe evacuate now?
Yeah, it certainly seems like they are heeding that warning, and the preparations are already underway, Tom. We can see this marina right here, one of many that have been cleared out, the boats just moving out into the water to get some more space, because as that wind comes, the last place you want to be is in a marina where those boats knocking against each other. We also know local government officials, they've scaled back their public transportation. It's going to be stopped altogether as we get closer to that storm. They've pulled lifeguards off the beaches, and of course the tourists here not happy at the timing of this trip. Many people are trying to figure out if they can make their way back to their homes before the storm actually gets here. But as we drove through the island, we saw the people who live here, the residents, they have these high building standards here. So they have concrete structures that have seemed pretty safe. We've not noticed a lot of boarding up of the windows, so hopefully those are prepared to handle hurricane forces, or maybe they have a little bit more time to actually get those windows boarded up. But we've experienced some of the outermost rain bands of this just massive size of this storm already, getting a few rounds of rain, a bit of sprinkles right now, but we know more is certainly on its way, Tom.
How about Puerto Rico? What are you hearing from there in terms of how bad it is, what the federal government is doing to help out?
Yeah, certainly a much different situation there right now. It was a tropical storm when it's made its way past Puerto Rico, knocking out power for hundreds of thousands of people. We know that President Biden did sign that disaster declaration, freeing up federal funding for them, the help they will need there. The good news that I've learned from Bermuda is that a lot of their electrical lines are actually underground, which may help. Some of them are above ground, so power outages still a concern here as well, Tom.
All right, Stephen, thank you very much. We go now to NBC's Angie Lastman, who's been tracking all of this from the weather wall. And you're watching Ernesto closely, right? So what is the path, the track, and what's the timeline going into Bermuda?
Yeah, so we've got basically another 36 hours where we're going to be talking a lot about this system for Bermuda before things really start to ramp up. The timeline is going to be late Friday into early Saturday for the worst of it and lasting into parts of Saturday, Tom. But we've still got a Category 1 hurricane right now. Winds are at 85 miles per hour. It's sitting just under 500 miles to the south-southwest of Bermuda, but it's moving at a pretty good clip. We're going to see that pace slow down, and we will likely see this system strengthen. Notice it becomes a Category 2 by this time tomorrow, maybe even earlier than that, potentially a strong Category 2. Will it flirt with Category 3? Maybe. Either way, the impacts to the island of Bermuda, they're not going to change. It's those tropical storm force winds into the day tomorrow, and then late into the day, into the evening hours tomorrow, and early into Saturday is when we see the hurricane force winds. We'll also see ample amounts of rain. The flash flooding is going to be a big thing with this. We likely will see the potential for up to a foot of rain in some spots there, maybe even more than that. There's no stranger. You heard Stephen talking about it. They are very prepared for these kinds of systems, but the last time we saw one passing near or over was September of 2020. That was Paulette, Category 2. We will see this system work into the northern Atlantic here down the line early next week, and we could be looking at Atlantic Canada, seeing some of those minor impacts. If you live on the east coast of the United States, though, we're not looking at direct impacts, but we are looking at some coastal kind of implications, especially if you plan to make it maybe a couple of days at the beach. We'll see the potential for that really large swell. The surf will be elevated. We'll have the potential for those rip current risks to be dangerous. The red flags will be up and down the coast, and we'll likely see some coastal erosion as well, and this will last through the weekend, Tom.
Okay, Angie, thank you very much. We'll keep watching it. A triple day of good economic news hitting the markets today. A new consumer spending report shows retail sales jumped 1% in July. Now, that was good news, beating expectations. And strong jobs numbers showing unemployment claims dropped by 7,000 from last week. All of that adding to recent data showing slowing inflation has Wall Street posting green arrows today. The Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ all up today and nicely, in some cases more than 2%, as you can see right there, surpassing the day before that August day that we had when things took a dive. NBC's Christine Romans joins me now to break all of this down. Christine, Walmart, America's largest retailer and private employer, had good news today, right? So what does all that mean?
It means the economy's just fine, sturdy, resilient, and consumers can dig deep in their pockets, even though they're sick and tired of inflation and they want value. They are still spending their money. They're spending their money on things that are on sale. They're spending their money on vacations. They're spending less money this year on gas prices, for example, than they were last year. And so things are moving along just fine here. You know, Walmart's saying it looks at its customers and its customers are not showing major distress. You don't see, if Walmart doesn't see a recession coming, that growth freak out that the markets had and economists had a little over a week ago doesn't seem like it's very warranted here. Things moving along steadily and at a decent clip. And, you know, I look at those jobless claims numbers. I really watch those very closely every week, Tom, because those are a proxy for layoffs. They've been pre-pandemic levels for months and months.
Yeah, so the stock markets are pretty much back to where they were before that big drop. And you and I were talking about this, and we both said, I don't think I'd be freaking out over this right now. We may hit a soft landing. It kind of looks like we may have a soft landing and no recession.
You know, and the Fed has a lot of wiggle room here. Remember, the Fed raised interest rates so much that if things do start to soften very quickly in the U.S. economy, the Fed has a lot of room to cut rates to goose things, right? So you're kind of in a sweet spot here. At least that's really the hope. Of course, there are always people who are worried. You know, there are CEOs who always say, well, I'm worried about a recession, because it's their job to be worried about when things aren't good anymore. But for right now, when you just look at the right now, things are pretty solid, slowing, which you would expect after all of those interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve, but still solid overall. It's so interesting to me that we've been looking and trying to forecast a recession for more than a year now, and there just hasn't been anything recessionary in these cards.
Yes. So can I ask you this? I don't want to blindside you, but you know who's been calling for a recession is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, right? I mean, he's been saying we could hit a recession. He keeps saying it's like the sky is falling. But he's been saying it for so long. If you bought stocks every time Jamie Dimon said there was going to be a recession, you'd be a very rich person today. And Jamie, I'm sorry, but that's the truth. That is the truth. Absolutely. You know, economists have predicted 10 of the last 2 recessions. And he's not an economist, but you get the point. Christine, thanks very much. Appreciate your expertise. Just in the last couple of hours, U.S. gymnast Jordan Chiles is speaking for the first time since Olympic officials stripped her of the bronze medal in the floor final and awarded it instead to a Romanian gymnast. Chiles calls that decision unjust in an online post, and she hits back on the attacks she's gotten since the medal saga all started, saying the unprompted, racially driven attacks on social media are wrong and extremely hurtful. Right now, Romania is preparing to hold a ceremony tomorrow for the new bronze medalist, but U.S. Olympic reps aren't done fighting for Jordan's medal, reiterating to NBC News that they are planning an appeal. We bring in now NBC's Emily Aketa, who's on this story. Emily, why would Romania go through with a medal ceremony when it feels like this isn't resolved? Are they trying to, push their narrative even further?
There's definitely a long road ahead. And when we reached out to Romanian gymnastics officials for comment, they pointed out and reiterated that in their appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, they had asked that Jordan Chiles be allowed to keep her bronze medal in addition to awarding their Romanian gymnast as well. So it kind of seems like maybe they are seeing these as 2 separate situations. And meantime, the U.S., as you had mentioned, they still have an avenue for an appeal, a higher international court that they could pursue. And we continue to hear from USA Gymnastics, from U.S. Olympic officials, and now from Jordan Chiles herself that they are gearing up for a fight. She released a statement on social media, posting to Instagram this afternoon that reads in part, "I am now confronted with one of the most challenging moments in my career. I believe at the end of this journey, the people in control will do the right thing." She also talks about the heartbreak. She called the news of learning that she was going to be stripped of her bronze medal, her first individual medal event for an individual event. she called it devastating, while also thanking the support from her loved ones, her friends, her teammates as well. The other thing that we're learning about from U.S. Olympic officials, a little bit of more insight into what was the lead up to the hearing that happened over the weekend. The U.S. Olympic officials, in a statement that says CAS sent crucial communications to erroneous email addresses, an error not corrected until August 9th, which was less than 24 hours before the hearing. This deprived us of adequate time to respond meaningfully or gather necessary evidence. Remember, they talked about since gathering that timestamp video that shows the coach had filed an appeal within the 1-minute deadline, Tom.
Okay, Emily, thank you. We're going to go over to President Trump, who's holding this news conference right now. He just started taking questions. Take a listen.
Again, this would never have happened. October 7th would have never happened, would have never, ever happened. And he asked for the meeting. We had the meeting. It was about 2 hours, 2.5 hours long. And I expect I might be talking to him, but I haven't since then. No.
Did you encourage him not to take a ceasefire deal? Did you give him any advice about ending the war?
He knows what he's doing. I did encourage him to get this over with. You want to get it over with. It has to get over with fast. But have victory, get your victory, and get it over with. It has to stop. The killing has to stop. Yes, please.
Mr. President. Thank you, President Trump. You've spoken very passionately about how God saved your life. And I'm wondering, have you put much thought into why God saved your life? As in, for what purpose has he been shielding and protecting you?
So, I don't know if you heard the question. You've spoken about God saving your life. That I've spoken passionately about it. And something happened because that was a miracle. I never looked that way. The audience was massive and it was in front of me. I never have that particular graph. That was a graph on, as you all know now, that it's very, I think everyone knows it very well, but it showed the great numbers on illegal immigration. It was the lowest point we've ever had. And it was one that I use less than 20% of the time. It's always at the end of the speech, not at the beginning of the speech. And it's always on the left side, not the right side. And yet, for some reason, I called it. It's not on a teleprompter. I do things largely without a teleprompter, frankly, because it's hard to hold an audience if you're going to go for an hour and a half or 2 hours reading a script. And I just talked about it, and I moved to my right, turned sharply to my right, ping. And if I didn't do that, I'm not here with you. So, yeah, God has something to do with it. It's a miracle, and God had something to do with it. And maybe it's we want to save the world. This world is going down. This world is going down. So it could be. But I believe that. I believe that my sons are very good shooters. They're like scratch golfers, better, relatively speaking, with shooters, great shooters. And Eric and Don both told me from 130 yards. I said, well, that's pretty far away, isn't it? They said, no, that's like a 1-foot putt with, weapons like the one being used. Plus, he was a good shooter. This guy was a good shooter. He went to the range and shot a lot, and he was supposed to be a pretty good shooter. They said a bad shooter would hit the target almost 100% of the time. So something happened. And I have to say the Secret Service sniper did an amazing job. He had 5 seconds to find the target and hit the target, and he hit the target within, think of this, 5 seconds. And he was much further away because he was over here, and this other person was over there. So you have to give credit. And I have to also say about the Secret Service, when I was hit, I knew it because when I touched, there was blood pouring all over my hand. I said, I guess I know what that is. And I was going down for protection. And they were screaming, get down, get down. There was bullets. And those Secret Service guys were, and person, Kate, they were on top of me in a matter of, I think, 3 seconds. It was time dead. And bullets were coming out. I would hear the bullet. I didn't realize you could hear it, but now I know very well. Those bullets were going right over my head. They were there and very brave. There was nobody that said, I'm not going to be going there. They just, they were there very quickly, and they were very brave. There were mistakes made, obviously. He shouldn't have been up there. The roof should have been taken care of, and there were mistakes made. There's no question about it. But there was a lot of bravery also. We have to remember that. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about credit card debt for just a second. You've got all these items.
It's a record.
It's a record.
Credit card.
48% up. And many families going into debt just to pay for groceries.
Yeah.
What's your message to Americans right now that you can make America affordable again?
Well, I would say my message to them. So he said, Credit card debt is at the all-time high. It's never been like this. What's your message to America? How are we going to solve that, and what will they do? You know what I think they should do? They should, on November 5th or sooner, if it's early voting, which largely it is, which is ridiculous. We should have one-day voting, paper ballots. We should have voter ID, and we should have proof of citizenship, because people are voting and people are going on now without citizenship. But we should do it, and maybe we'll be able to get that done, too. It's one of the things I want to do. But my message to them would be very simple. Vote for Trump, and we're going to fix the problem. We're going to get it fixed. We'll get it fixed.
Follow-up question,
yes,
if I could. Kamala's been promising on day one, I'll do this. And for basically 4 years, she's promised this day one.
Yeah.
What will you do on day one to turn this country around?
So she is saying when she gets in, she's in now. And especially with Biden, because, I mean, he's not in the best of shape. But you know what? She's in there now. She can do anything she wants. And she's still saying, if you elect me, I'll do this, I'll do... Why didn't she do it? Here's my one question. It's the easiest question. Because she complains about everything. Why didn't she do it? That's all I ask. On day one, we're going to drill, baby, drill, and we're going to close the border, and we're going to let people come in, but they're going to come in legally. They're going to come into our country legally. But on day one, we're going to do many things. You know, I can do a lot of things at one time. But the question's often is, what's the first thing you're going to do? I would say we have a tie. We're going to close the border. We're going to stop the millions of people coming in, and we're going to take all of the criminals that have come in, and we know every one of them. I know. And the local police know better than anybody else. They're going to work with us. I've spoken to a lot of the sheriffs, every police, virtually every law enforcement group in America has endorsed Trump. I don't think anybody's endorsed Kamala. Not one. I don't think anybody's endorsed them. And you know that better than anybody. In Florida, all over California, they've endorsed me. We have the relationship I have with law enforcement. And these are great people, and people that we have to really cherish and respect and let them do their job and protect them. And you'll always have a bad apple in everything. You have bad apples as reporters. That I can tell you many. I'd say about 80%. But you're always going to have bad apples. But you have very, very few when you look at it. Very, very few. You have to let them do their job. You have to protect them. But basically, we're going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to get the energy prices down almost immediately, and we're going to close the border, and we're going to get the crooked ones out, the bad ones out, and we're going to let a lot of people come in, because we need more people, especially with AI coming and all of the different things, and the farmers need, everybody needs. But we're going to make sure that they're not murderers, killers, drug dealers, and the kind of people that we have largely coming in right now. Okay?
Mr. President, many of your allies who want you to win in November say your current strategy isn't working, that you need to stop with the personal attacks on Kamala Harris and deliver a more disciplined message. Do you agree? And also, you added more people to your campaign today. Yeah. Is that a sign of a shifting strategy? No,
I think it's a sign of we want to close it out. We have great people. Susie is fantastic, as you know, and Chris is fantastic. They're leading it. Corey Lewandowski's coming in. He'll be, personal envoy, or he'll be at some level. They're going to be, they're doing a great job. Look, we've taken, with all of the abuse we've taken from the fake news media, all of this horrific abuse we take, and all I want to do is make the country good. All I want to do is have strong borders and good education. We want to have choice for education. So important, so many different things. You would think it would be the other way. We rebuilt the military. We did so many great things. But that's the way it's been for Republicans, and I guess more so for me than anybody in history, and that's okay, because we're leading in the polls. For the most part, we're leading in the polls. We were leading Biden by a lot. We're leading now, but I think when she's exposed, I think we're going to beat her by a lot more than we would have beaten Biden by, because he had a little group of people that have been voting for him for a long time. She doesn't have that. People don't know who she is. As far as the personal attacks, her because of what she's done to the country. I'm very angry at her that she'd weaponized the justice system against me and other people. Very angry at her. I think I'm entitled to personal attacks. I don't have a lot of respect for her. I don't have a lot of respect for her intelligence, and I think she'll be a terrible president. And I think it's very important that we win. And whether the personal attacks are good, bad, I mean, she certainly attacks me personally. She actually called me weird. He's weird. It was just a soundbite. And she called J.D. and I weird. He's not weird. He was a great student at Yale. He went to Ohio State, graduated in 2 years, at the top of his class, and all of these different things. And we have this guy that's running a very failed state, who's had a terrible career. I mean, you have him saying they're weird. No, he's a weird guy. And she's weird in her policy. Who wouldn't want to have strong borders? Who doesn't want to have lower taxes? You know, all my life I've watched as politicians campaigned, and I've always been on, for the most part, on the other side, on the side that these people are on. And they always talked about, we're going to reduce taxes. This is the only campaign I've ever heard where they're saying, we're going to increase your taxes. And then people say they're going to vote for him? I don't know. So I don't think so. I don't think people know who she is yet. Because really people didn't know. You can ask the man on the street. I saw it on one of the shows today. They asked the man on the street, what's the last name of Kamala? Nobody knew. It's Harris. Nobody knew the last name. I don't even use it because nobody knows who I'm talking about. People don't know who she is. She's a radical left socialist. But beyond that, I mean, she's way beyond socialism, who's going to destroy our country. And when they find out, I think you're going to see something. But right now, even not knowing her, and with all of like the cover of Time magazine, they didn't put a picture. They got a great artist to do it. What was that all about? What was that all about? The whole thing is crazy. I just want to win for the country. Some people say, oh, why don't you be nice? But they're not nice to me. They want to put me in prison, just so you understand. They tell me I should be nice. They want to put me in prison. It's never happened before in the history of our country. I did nothing wrong. I have crooked judges. I have crooked prosecutors. And they're all Democrats, all Democrat areas, other than in Florida, where you had a brilliant judge who ruled in my favor. I won the case, the documents case, won it in its entirety. And Jack Smith, deranged Jack Smith, suffered a defeat. But in New York City, everything's clubhouse, everything. I know it very well. I grew up there. I know it very well. And we have a very crooked system. And it's one of the reasons that New York is dying. Nobody wants to come in. No companies want to come in because the courtroom system is so corrupt, both at a federal level and at a state level and a city level. And they put you into an area where you have 3% Republican vote. It's all a rigged deal, just like Fani, F-A-N-I, Fani, with her boyfriend. And I think that's been discredited, too. They've been discredited. But think of it. They don't want me to be a little bit nasty. They want to put me in prison. They want to put me. It's never happened before in the history of our country. It's happened in third world countries, but it's never happened here. And they're in danger because you create a precedent for doing that. And once that happens, that's a really bad thing. When in the years before, and I've said this a few times, not too much, but with Hillary, she was subpoenaed by Congress to give everything she's got, and she burned it, she acid washed it, bleach bit they call it. She totally scrubbed it, and then they broke everything with hammers, with fire, they burned it. And then she said, I don't have anything. Well, it turned out that she had a lot to give. And everybody said, lock her up, lock her up. And I used to go easy, just easy, easy. Then we won. And I said, wouldn't it be terrible? And I lose. Some people are upset when I did this, but you have to look at it maybe differently now. I say, wouldn't it be terrible to put the wife of the president, former president of the United States, into a prison? Now think of that. Hillary Clinton, she was Secretary of State. She was the wife of a president of the United States who used to be a friend of mine before I ran for politics. He was a friend of mine. He used to play my golf course all the time. I have a great golf course right next to their home in Westchester. He used to be there all the time. It was his favorite course. But you know what? I could have done that very easily. She was so guilty. And I said to my people, wouldn't it be terrible to put, wouldn't it be terrible to take, and we won the election, wouldn't it be terrible to take a former Secretary of State who was the wife of the President of the United States and put her into a prison? But that's what they want to do with me, and I did nothing wrong. It's all crooked politics and really crooked judges. You know I have a gag order. Do you know I can't even talk about it right now? Do you know that I have a judge who has a gag order? He doesn't want me to talk. And the reason he doesn't want me to talk is because what I say is so devastating and so horrible for him. But think of it. I have a gag order. There's never been a politician in history, I mean, probably for any politician for a city council office. I'm the leading candidate to be president. I won virtually unanimously. You know, I beat everybody. It was the quickest primary in history. There's never been one that was done so early. I had people that were very talented people, and I beat them by 45, 50, 60, 70, 80 points. There was never a close race. Nobody was even close. Good talent. They weren't close. And I'm running against the Democrats. So it's a two-party system, whether we like it or not. Republican, I'm the Republican, and I'm leading. But let's say I'm tied, but I'm leading. I believe I'm leading by a lot more than people think, and I believe we'll be leading by a lot more. And I have a judge who put a gag order on me. So when you ask me a question, or when you ask me a question, I can't give you an answer, because if I give the answer, they want to put you in jail. He said, we'll put him in jail if he talks beyond the gag order. And this is in a state where, unfortunately, the laws have been very bad, and they haven't been upheld by the appellate divisions generally. Although I have one case where we a certain judge, I won't use names, but the Attorney General case where we won 5 appeals on the same case, the most ever trial. It was a ridiculous, horrible decision where you have a very, very biased voting population and a judge whose hatred of Donald Trump was beyond belief. And we won the case, but he ruled a ridiculous amount of money, civil case, ruled ridiculous. Now, this is what they're doing is interference with an election. They want to interfere. Look at the one thing they want to sentence right before the election takes place. Let's sentence him, because who's going to vote for him if we sentence him? Let's sentence him right before. No, this is interference with a presidential election at a state level, and it's a state that always goes Democrat. It's interference, and as you know, the Supreme Court ruled recently on immunity, and I'm immune from all of this stuff that they charged me with. But isn't it a terrible thing? And yet Hillary Clinton, when it came time to make a decision, I said, I don't want to put the wife of the President of the United States in prison. I want the country to come together and to be unified. And here it is a few years later, and these people say, let's put him, why? Because I challenge an election? Because I want to challenge an election, or some other reason? It's a really disgraceful thing. It's a shame. And it's a very dangerous thing for both parties, because once they start that ball rolling, once they started rolling, that's a nasty ball. Yes, please. Please.
2 quick questions here. Nikki Haley told our Brett Baer that Republicans need to stop whining about Kamala Harris, focus on courting those independents, those suburban women, the moderates out there. What do you think of that strategy, and would you consider having Nikki Haley on the campaign trail with you?
Sure. I think that we've done very well. I think that we're hitting a nerve. I think this is a different kind of a race. All we have to do is define our opponent as being a communist or a socialist or somebody that's going to destroy our country. You know, I fought Nikki very hard. I beat her in her own state by legendary numbers. And I get along with her fine. I appreciate that she endorsed me and all of that. No, I think that I think relatively to what they're doing and how radical they are and how, in many ways, how sick they are, I think I'm doing a very calm campaign. I mean, we're here. There's no shouting. Now, you'll say he ranted and raved, and not you, but some of you will say he ranted and raved. I didn't rant and rave. I'm a very calm person, believe it or not. If I wasn't, I probably wouldn't be around anymore, you know, probably wouldn't be around. But no, I think I appreciate her advice. I have to do it my way. You know, I ran against her, and I did it my way. People said I should maybe do it a different way, but I won in South Carolina by numbers that nobody's ever seen before. You know, it wasn't even close. And I think she's a good woman. I'd love to have her support. Yeah, she gave me support, but I'd love to have her go around and campaign.
Quick follow-up on the economy. You mentioned this in your
Okay,
remarks.
we're going to go ahead and dip out of former President Trump's news conference. And if he breaks news or makes news, then we will certainly jump back in. A couple of fact checks as we move along here. Of course, the former president said, quote, "I did nothing wrong." In fact, he's been convicted of 34 felonies in New York. He accused the Biden administration of being involved. The Biden administration has no role, of course, in a state court decision. He talked about wanting to go drill, baby, drill, increase oil production. Oil production in the United States is already at an all-time high. He said nobody is endorsing Kamala Harris. In fact, the United Auto Workers have endorsed her. Adam Kinzinger has endorsed her as well, a Republican. Bill Ward, the former governor of Massachusetts, as well as the Trump press secretary, Stephanie Grisham. He talked about gasoline prices. Gasoline is right now $3.42 a gallon. A year ago, it was $3.86 a gallon. We've seen a shifting place here in terms of polls across the country. Harris is now ahead in 3 battleground states, according to 538 polling. She is now ahead in Michigan by 3, Pennsylvania by 2.4, Wisconsin by 3.7. All of those, of course, within the margin of error. In Arizona, she is up by 1, according to 538. In Georgia, a fraction. And in North Carolina, Trump is up by half a point. In all, nationwide, the average, according to 538, in fact, Harris is up by 3 over Trump at the moment. So there is a lot there to try to make sure we try to set the record straight. Dasha Burns, is covering the Trump campaign, and she is always watching every word he says. What else did I miss? What else do you want to point to here?
Always watching, except when I'm talking to you, Tom. I'm taking a little break right now. Listen, this is kind of a quintessential Trump press conference, right? He started off talking about the economy, sort of started to drift away from that into some personal attacks. He was just asked by one of the reporters there whether or not those personal attacks are the right thing for him to be doing, whether or not he might take some of the advice of his own allies that have been on the airwaves and behind the scenes talking to him to sort of shift the strategy to more of a policy focus, a contrast between himself and Vice President Kamala Harris. And he said to that reporter, "I'm entitled to those personal attacks," because he said, "I'm so angry at this administration, at what President Biden has done and what Vice President Kamala Harris has done." But he said, what we need to do is to define our opponent. But I think that that is exactly where his allies are pointing to a challenge for the former president to stick with a clear message, to stick with a direct line of attack, to stick with a specific strategy. Because right now, as we've seen over the last however many minutes this has been going on now, there has been quite a broad spectrum of attacks against Harris. And he still continues to attack President Biden. Of course, that is an opponent for whom he had a message, for whom he had a strategy, for whom he had a nickname, right? And as trivial as that might sound, the former president that's one of his talents. That's one of the things that his aides like about him, is that he can define his opponent so well, but seems to be struggling with that when it comes to this new opponent, Vice President Harris.
Yeah, I did also want to make sure that we are clear that on credit card debt, the former president is absolutely accurate. Credit card debt has hit a record of $1.1 trillion over the last week or so. That news breaking, and we've covered it, and CNBC has covered it as well. Dasha, thank you very much. A shakeup to tell you about in the real estate industry that could mean big changes for consumers on both sides of a real estate transaction. That's because new rules take effect on Saturday following the settlement of a class action lawsuit involving the National Association of Realtors, and it will change the way real estate agents get paid when you buy or sell a home. Buyers will need to sign contracts with an agent before the agent can show them any properties. Sellers will decide whether they want to cover the cost of an agent fee for buyers, and broker compensation offers will not be posted with the home listing. Taking a drink of water. Some say this could actually lower commissions and even some home prices. CNBC's senior real estate correspondent Diana Olick is here to help us make sense of it all. I need some water after all of that, Diana. This is all part of that big NAR legal settlement, right? So what is it designed to do for the consumer?
Well, so, Tom, it's designed to give the consumers more clarity about what they are and, importantly, are not paying commissions when buying or selling a home. So for buyers, if they're using a buyer's agent, they will now have to sign an agreement with them up front. And if the seller doesn't agree to pay the buyer's agent, then the buyer will have to pay themselves. And that'll add to costs and factor into what they can and can't afford. Now, for higher-end buyers, probably doesn't mean that much. It's really the first-time buyers, those on the edge of being able to afford a home. They'll take a hit. If the buyer can't afford to pay an agent commission, then they may decide not to use an agent. That could hurt them. It could open them up to being preyed upon. They may not understand things like contingencies and inspections, appraisals, closing costs, all the things that an agent is there to help them with. Now, for sellers, it means they don't necessarily have to pay the buyer agent's commission, and that just saves them money. Tom?
Okay, so then that leads to my question. Could it actually lower home prices, as some have suggested?
Well, so there is an argument to be made to that, because if you look at the math, in the past, sellers usually had to pay the full 6% commission. So say you're looking at a $500,000 home, that's about $30,000. So some think it'll lower the prices because if you're not factoring in half of that commission, then you could lower the price by that much, right? Lower it by $15,000 if you're not paying the buyer agent's commission. But agents I spoke with, they don't actually agree with that. There are so many other things right now that are factoring into sale prices. Number one being, of course, interest rates. And then there's the fact that more supply is coming onto the market, which gives sellers less of an advantage. And prices are already overheated. So when you think about that possible buyer agent commission, it really doesn't weigh in as much as all the other factors that are weighing on the housing market right now.
When I sell a house or buy a house, can I put you on retainer because you seem to have all the answers right at your fingertips, and I need
Well, we'll have to negotiate an agreement, won't we, Tom?
Sure. Okay. I'll check with you on your rate.
Under the new rules.
Diana,
and I'll have
thank
to get a
you
license.
very much. Okay, good. All right. Still to come, turns out celebrity endorsements do influence elections. How much? Stick around for our breakdown. Busy day. We're coming back. We're back, and candidates across the political spectrum have been relying on them for decades. We're talking about celebrities as politicians seek to highlight star power at their campaign events. But can those endorsements do any good, more than just generating buzz? Do they actually increase voter turnout? A new study looks into that very thing. Rahema Ellis has the story for us in tonight's breakdown.
Megan Thee Stallion performing at Vice President Harris's rally in Atlanta. Coconut. Charlie XCX calling Kamala brat after her new hit album. That shout out went viral. On the other side, at last month's Republican National Convention, Kid Rock and Hulk Hogan taking the stage for former President Trump.
Say fight! Enough was enough!
But do these celebrity endorsements actually make a difference? A new Harvard study shows they do.
It really is a very powerful thing to have a celebrity get involved.
For example, in 2018, Taylor Swift shared a single Instagram post with her then 112 million followers endorsing Democratic candidates and linking them to vote.org. 72 hours later, there were 250,000 new voter registrations.
Does that translate into actual votes?
Yes, we do see an increase in voter participation amongst these specific registrants.
But it's not just for specific candidates. It impacts political and civic engagement overall, too. As Americans rank behind other developed democracies around the world, 31 out of 50 in terms of voter turnout, according to a Pew Research report.
We did find that these individual celebrities are being really thoughtful to really help reach young people and help them understand the voting process, the deadlines, where to find their polling place, even what to wear to the polls.
Celebrities stumping for political candidates, not a new phenomenon.
Everyone is voting for Jack.
Frank Sinatra putting out this campaign song for JFK in 1960.
He is the one.
Nearly 50 years later, Oprah supporting Barack Obama. It can take more than star power to move voters. Hillary Clinton had plenty of celebrity backing in 2016.
We have to get out and make sure we vote.
In the days leading up to the election, basketball superstar LeBron James joined her in Cleveland at one of her final rallies. Clinton went on to lose Ohio by 8 points and the election. And it's not always about positive attention. Even before Vice President Harris was the Democratic candidate, A-list actor George Clooney joined the groundswell of calls for Joe Biden to step out of the race, even after backing and hosting multi-million-dollar fundraisers for him. While most of Hollywood historically leans more liberal, some other high-profile Trump supporters include Jon Voight, Roseanne Barr, and Amber Rose, who also spoke at the RNC.
The left told me to hate Trump, and even worse, to hate the other side, the people who support him.
The Harvard study emphasizes that perceived authenticity is key to an endorsement mattering.
Specifically, young people are mistrustful of elected officials and institutions. That does not actually apply to celebrities.
Our media diet has changed, and the different modes of communication, meeting voters where they are, and all of those endorsements could end up mattering.
Something to keep in mind with polls still close, as we expect the Democratic National Convention in Chicago to be star-studded.
Not everyone's a political expert, so sometimes an average voter wants to take cues from who to actually support an election. Sometimes it can be a neighbor, sometimes it can be a friend, and often it's a celebrity.
Rahima Ellis, NBC News.
That is a wrap for this hour. Rahima Ellis there in New York. As for us, we're back right now on News Now. And we come on the air with a dangerous few days ahead for Bermuda, right off the coast, of course, of North Carolina. As Hurricane Ernesto bears down, we'll be live from the island, and we're going to hear about potential impacts here in the U.S. along the East Coast. And the charges announced today in the death of Friends star Matthew Perry, our prosecutors say he got the ketamine blamed, how he got the ketamine blamed for his death. Then a unique battle in a battleground state, why Uber is backing a controversial initiative in Nevada. And one city's fight over reparations, why some people are pushing for the payments to Black Americans to stop. Plus, we're hearing for the first time today from Olympic gymnast Jordan Chiles since she lost her bronze medal, the hate she says she's getting online. That's coming up later in our show. Good day, I'm Tom Costello. I'm in for Hallie. We begin tracking the path of destruction from Hurricane Ernesto as it makes a beeline for Bermuda. And you can see the boarded up buildings, lots of people there stocking up on supplies and groceries before the storm actually hits. Take a look at all the water overflowing the dams in Puerto Rico. That's a lot of water. They're still cleaning up for that area after the storm skirted past the island, but it hit it hard as a tropical storm. Hundreds of thousands lost power, and today, 250,000 are still in the dark on the island. It's now a Cat 1 hurricane. Forecasters say it could become a Cat 2 when it reaches Bermuda. Winds clocking in at about 85 miles per hour. Ernesto is threatening to stir up dangerous surf, could drop a whopping 12 inches of rain, and the authorities there are urging people prepare before it's too late. Take a listen.
I cannot stress enough the importance of completing your hurricane preparations immediately. For those who have not yet done so, I urge you to act now. Time is running out.
NBC's Stephen Romo is on the island in Bermuda. Angie Glassman is watching it all from the meteorological standpoint. Let's start, though, with Stephen. And you're in Hamilton, Bermuda right now. Stephen, looks like you got a little more rain than you did an hour ago. What's it looking like?
Yeah, Tom, you're right about that. The rain has picked up a little bit, the very beginning of the bands that we're expected to see here in Bermuda. But Bermuda knows hurricanes well, and they are taking it seriously. We showed you earlier they had mostly cleared out this marina. The last ship actually just took off into more open waters because you do not want to have these boats close together when the wind actually picks up. And driving through, you were talking about Puerto Rico and the preparations. Here, they have very strict building standards, a lot of concrete homes, even limestone roofs, very fortified for hurricanes. Of course, though, every island will have its limits for that. They also have buried a lot of their electrical lines. So what we're seeing in Puerto Rico, all of those hundreds of thousands of power outages, they're hoping to avoid that here, but there are still some above ground power lines that they have to watch out for. That is for the residents here. The tourists, as another story, a lot of unhappy campers of people who inadvertently planned their trip the same time Ernesto was planning its trip here. People trying to figure out if they can make a flight back to their home, wherever that may be, before the storm actually gets here, expected to be in full force on Saturday. But as time ticks down, they may just have to hunker down like everyone else, ride out the storm and try to take off once they get to the other side, Tom.
Yeah, Bermuda is about 650 miles, of course, off the coast of North Carolina. And we know that we've got NBC viewers there in Bermuda. I'm just curious, you've been to Puerto Rico and you're there in Bermuda. Is the infrastructure more intact, better able to withstand what could be more of a direct hit than Puerto Rico?
It certainly seems like it after they've experienced so many devastating storms like Fabian back in 2003, which many people still talk about. They did change the way they do a lot of things here in Puerto Rico over the past 20 years, hoping to avoid another situation like that, including those buried utility lines, as well as the building standards that they've actually had for years now. They're hoping they can fare better than Puerto Rico did. And it was actually just a tropical storm when it's made its way to Puerto Rico. But as we know, the rating of the storm doesn't necessarily amount to the damage and inconvenience it can cause people, Tom.
All right, Stephen, thank you. We wish them well. Thank you very much. Let's get over now to our other breaking news. I'm sorry, let's go to Angie, as long as we have her. Sorry, Angie. Let's talk about the weather, shall we? Talk about Ernesto's, talk about the track. You're watching that closely.
Yeah, we are. And as Stephen just mentioned, Tom, we're watching this thing kind of with the timeline of Friday, things starting to deteriorate, and then Saturday, things really ramping up. The latest is that we've got a Category 1 hurricane, 85-mile-per-hour winds. It's been battling a little bit of dry air. We're not expecting a whole lot in the way of weakening with this system as it continues its northerly track over the next couple of days. It actually looks to intensify as we get into tomorrow, kind of gearing up to bring some of those impacts to Bermuda late into the day tomorrow with the tropical storm force winds, and then into the late evening hours, overnight into Saturday is when we see those hurricane force conditions starting to impact folks in Bermuda. We'll also see the potential for some really heavy rain. We saw what happened in Puerto Rico. We could see the same kind of amounts of rainfall for Bermuda here by the time this is all said and done. Upwards of a foot of rain in some spots will be possible, but we're going to see this kind of be a Friday, Saturday timeline. Now, we have to look back to 2020 to see a system this strong passing this close to Bermuda. That was Paulette. They've got a lot of experience in Bermuda. They, of course, deal with these things a lot of every season, essentially, with the location of where they are in the Atlantic. But once we get on the other side of this by Monday, we'll see that system working just off the coast of Canada, potentially impacting folks in Atlantic Canada down the line. But we've got a long way to go before we get there. One thing to note, we're talking about the center of the system likely being about 600 miles from the coast of the United States, the East Coast, that is. But we're still going to see those indirect impacts. So we know the seas are going to be churned up. This is going to bring those large swells to folks across the eastern coast of the United States. So if you're planning to head out to maybe coastal New England or off the coast of the Carolinas, not great for boating and not great for beach going, at least going into the water. We're going to see those rip currents be problematic through the weekend. This is going to be a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday kind of thing. We'll start to see things winding down as far as Bermuda's direct impacts on Sunday, but we'll still be dealing with the coastal issues across parts of the East Coast as we head through the weekend up and down the East Coast of the United States, Tom.
All right. Angie, thank you very much. Angie Lastman watching it all from the weather map. All right, now to that breaking news out of Los Angeles. Federal prosecutors have charged 5 people in connection with the deadly overdose of Friends star Matthew Perry. They are Perry's personal assistant. His name is Kenneth Awamasa, a drug dealer dubbed the ketamine queen, 2 licensed doctors, and an acquaintance of Perry. Investigators have been trying to track down the source of the ketamine that Perry used before he was found floating face down in a hot tub back in October. At a press conference today, a U.S. attorney based in L.A. read out really damning text messages from one of the doctors. Take a listen.
They distributed approximately 20 vials of ketamine to Mr. Perry in exchange for $55,000 in cash. Defendant Placentia saw this as an opportunity to profit off of Mr. Perry. He wrote in a text message in September 2023, quote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay."
Yeah, boy, you know, we played that sound an hour ago, and it's just so disturbing. Steve, this was clearly an illicit trade, right? $55,000 for so many vials of ketamine.
It clearly was. And that's what prosecutors have so thoroughly laid out. There's a 34-page complaint. 5 people, you listed all of them, are involved in this complaint. Only 2 of them are listed as the primary defendants. The first is, of course, the ketamine queen, who is also in this document accused of distributing about 50 vials of ketamine to Matthew Perry before his death. That's on top of the 20 vials from the doctor. So in total, we're talking about just a mountain of this stuff, all within the span of about a month before he died in that hot tub. The other person that's listed as a defendant is the doctor, Dr. P, the guy that had that heinous quote that prosecutors read out. The rest of them are so-called co-conspirators, right? There's the guy who was sort of the middleman, knew Matthew Perry, knew these people that were able to get him the drugs that he wanted, and sort of went as a go-between. The other one is personal assistant, and then another doctor involved in this. 2 of them have plea agreements already in place. Like, they weren't arrested today. They've already had a deal with prosecutors. The assertion is they've probably sort of flipped on the rest of them. That's where they got the majority of this information. And there is a bunch of it here. 34 pages listing sort of distribution, injection, sort of talking about the cover-up on the other end of it. Some of it is really heinous. It's hard to read, Tom. But I think it was important to the prosecutor's message that they will not tolerate this sort of behavior, especially in a high-profile case like this.
And it may underscore that Perry was still struggling with addiction, you know, even though he was on this book tour and talking about trying to get and stay sober. Listen, talk about how much jail time that these individuals might face, and separately how the family is reacting.
Yeah, first of all, like, I think the addiction part of it is maybe the most egregious part, right? Like, you're talking about a guy that has a disease. Addiction is not some sort of mental volleyball that you're playing in your head. It is a physical, literal, chemical disease. This man suffered from that. He fell off the wagon, and instead of these people that were thought to be his friends, according to prosecutors, lifting him up, they're finding a way to get him drugs so they can get paid, according to prosecutors.
Let's not go on, though. I'm sorry, Steve, pardon me. No, not you. Pardon me. I'm talking to my producer. Okay. My apologies. Not you. It's about a different issue.
Well, look, I want to go on and on about this because it's so egregious. But let's talk about the family, right? The Morrison family released a statement to us saying, quote, in part, we were and still are heartbroken by Matthew's death, but it has helped us to know law enforcement has taken this case very seriously. We look forward to justice taking its course. Of course, 2 of the defendants in court today, and we'll learn a whole lot more after this plays out. Tom?
Again, that wasn't meant at you. I'm sorry. Conversation with the producer.
I believe you.
And we weren't even talking about this story. But anyway, Steve, thanks very much. Good information.
Thanks,
breaking news tonight with former President Donald Trump just wrapping up in the last few minutes. His second news conference, and there it is. You see the images of this just wrapping up. You can see there's a shot of him speaking to various folks there, supporters. He spoke for about an hour and a half about everything from inflation to windmills killing birds. He attacked Vice President Harris, President Biden, even Hillary Clinton. It's part of this strategy that we've been seeing to paint a distinct contrast between his own campaign and that of Vice President Harris. His camp hitting her hard on her limited availability for press conferences and interviews with the press. The former president's allies and advisors trying to get him to focus on policy rather than personal attacks, but things have not really always been going that way. This comes as the stage is now set for a VP debate. Vice presidential nominees Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance agreeing to meet on October 1st on CBS. NBC's Monica Alba is in Washington. Vaughn Hilliard was at the news conference. We have them both. Vaughn, a lot of this is just kind of a rerun of attacks that we've been seeing for some time now, right? Do we learn or hear much new?
Hey, Tom, 1 second. 1 second, Tom.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. President. Mr. President, you were talking about your cases. If you get in the White House, would you ask your Attorney General to drop the federal cases against you? Would you ask your Attorney General next year, if you get in the White House, to drop the federal cases against you? The response was that he does not want to talk. I don't know. Sorry, you guys all captured that in real time there. The former president walking into his Bedminster estate there. And the question that I asked to him, just as a setup here, was, Tom, about the federal cases that are still pending against him. And over the course of those 90 minutes here outside of his club, he talked about a range of issues from the economy, high gas prices, high food prices, the state of the economy. But he also went in and bemoaned the fact that these charges and potential sentencing in the New York-related case next month are still all pending against him in the backdrop of this election here. And the question that you just heard me attempt to ask him there was about whether he would ask his next attorney general in 2025 to drop the cases, the federal cases, against him if he were to get back into the White House. And as, I don't know if you could or could not hear, he said he did not want to talk about those issues at this time here. And so I think there's a lot of outstanding questions, clearly in the next 2.5 months, but the former president answering a series of questions on a range of issues here today. Tom.
Well, you did a great job there reaching out and trying to get a real-time reaction, so thank you for that. Always on the job, the intrepid Von Hilliard. Listen, we saw another one of these press conferences from the former president, a week ago at Mar-a-Lago. He calls it a press conference, but it's not really like news is being made here. It seems like kind of just an opportunity for him to vamp for 90 minutes.
Right, and he's trying to strike an actual contrast with Kamala Harris, the top of the Democratic ticket, who he has criticized and tried to make an issue out of the fact that she hasn't done an interview or answered extensive questions since taking over the top of the ticket here. And so Donald Trump has not been keen to take news organizations' questions over the course of the last year and a half, really ever since leaving Washington, D.C. in the aftermath of January 6th. But the last week, it's been a little bit different, and he did take a series of questions here, and one of the questions that a fellow reporter asked him was about Nikki Haley's criticisms just 2 nights ago about what she said was a lack of focus from his campaign, and the fact that he was focusing on personal attacks, like questioning Kamala Harris's race and questioning her crowd sizes and saying that she wants him to win, but he and the campaign need to focus. And the reporter asked about those attacks, and he said that he feels like the personal attacks are warranted, seemingly suggesting that he is not going to stop from going on offense against him, again, suggesting related to the charges, the 4 indictments that have been brought against him, that they are politically motivated. His argument that he has made consistently and that Democrats are responsible for the indictments against him, and so therefore he feels like it's warranted. And in terms of the campaign focus, today's event was actually a little bit different. You can see some of the boxed foods, cereals, Oreos, milk, eggs, that he was trying to highlight here as prices that had been increased over the last years. I mean, all of this is sort of difficult here to consolidate into a couple talking points, if I may, though, Tom, right? Because if you're looking at the economy, right, you're looking at the fact that inflation just 2 years ago was 7-8%. Now it's down to under 3%. Typically, an average is 2% inflation. And so this for Donald Trump, when we're talking about some of these issues, some of the data points have actually turned against what could have been politically beneficial to him. And so this is where Donald Trump is now heeding some of that outside advice to try to hone in and take on some of the issues while also maintaining his personal attacks in the way that Donald Trump has over the last 9 years.
Listen, you make a very good point. I think it's worth repeating. Inflation hit 9% 2 years ago, the direct result of the supply chain crisis. We've seen it globally. It still exists in Europe to a much worse extent, and we are now well below 3%, 2.9%. However, he also makes a good point that so far Vice President Harris has not held news conference availabilities, and we'll keep on her campaign for that. Let's bring in Monica Alba in Washington with the latest. Monica, can I just vamp and ask you about that one? Because, of course, is the pressure building on the vice president to hold a news conference to speak more fluidly and be more available, since Trump is doing exactly that?
And to do a interview, perhaps, Tom,
Yep.
or a joint interview with her running mate, which is really customary after a ticket is announced in past cycles, at least. And so we know that the vice president's campaign has been aware of that pressure. They say that they are hopeful they will get an interview with the two of them on the books with some major news organization or network by the end of this month. Of course, they are trying to argue that they're very focused on the Democratic National Convention next week. And we should point out that last week, toward the end of the week, the vice president started to take a couple more questions in a casual setting from the pool of reporters who were traveling with her to a couple of those battleground states. But those gaggles, as we call them, really just last a couple of minutes, and they are not the more substantive back and forth that you can have at an organized press conference. So, yes, certainly we have been pushing for that, and certainly the vice president's team knows that. And they are saying that she's been traveling and campaigning a lot, and that's what's taking up a lot of her time. Next week will be the DNC, and then they claim after that they will be doing more media. Tom.
Well, listen, they had a big day today on announcing that there are significant price cuts as it relates to Medicare prices on prescription drugs, right? 10 widely used prescription drug prices, drugs rather, and the prices are being cut dramatically, in some cases hundreds and hundreds of dollars for diabetes drugs, for example, and heart issues, and there's a whole long list here, arthritis drugs. Under Medicare, of course, we know that this has been something that's been a campaign issue for the president and the vice president, and so they can count that as a win today, right?
Yeah, and really what they can do is use the sort of trappings of incumbency here to try to make that point, because this was an official event. They appeared together. It's hard to divorce it from the politics of this moment, but this is something that they're saying was doable because of legislation that the Biden-Harris administration worked to get across the finish line, and now the VP is sort of under pressure to take that a bit further in terms of what are her other proposals for lowering costs for Americans. So that's why you're going to see her tomorrow in North Carolina with a speech that is a campaign one, talking about some of those proposals, specifically when it comes to corporate price gouging and when it comes to things like affordability for housing and rental units. So she's going to try to broaden that out to try to give voters some details about that too, Tom. But this was a significant accomplishment in her capacity as vice president and an opportunity for her to praise the president's leadership, which she did today as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Monica. We appreciate your reporting, as always, from the White House. Voters in one of the key swing states in the election could be facing a controversial ballot initiative in the coming years, backed by rideshare giant Uber. The initiative would put a 20% cap on what are called contingency fees for lawyers. That's the cut that an attorney gets from a settlement when they win a case. Those normally hover around 25, 40% or so. Those fees make it so that plaintiffs often don't need to pay money up front in order to bring a lawsuit. Some of the lawyers involved in litigation against big companies like Uber say capping those fees would hamstring their efforts to bring lawsuits against big companies.
These are extremely expensive cases to bring, and there's never any guarantee of any kind of settlement. Trials are expensive. They can take a long time.
Uber funding the initiative while it faces several hundred lawsuits alleging sexual misconduct by its drivers. The company says the initiative won't limit its exposure to lawsuits, but would put more money in the pockets of plaintiffs. It's complicated, so let's bring in Yasmin Vasugian to break all of this down for us. I got to say, that's confusing for me. Walk through this for us.
Yeah, it is confusing. So essentially, and by the way, Tom, this isn't going to be on the ballot until 2026. So that would be our next midterm elections. We're looking at that far out. That's, in fact, if they're able to secure the signatures, in which Uber says, and this political action committee is also saying they are on the way to securing. So essentially what they're saying is, with these kind of injury lawsuits, right, in which they're seeking out compensation for these alleged injuries, the lawyer can only collect 20% on the settlement. So, for instance, if you are seeking out a lawsuit on Uber, say an Uber driver sexually assaulted you, and you file a lawsuit against Uber and you receive in your settlement $100,000, they're saying in the state of Nevada, your attorney could only collect $20,000 on that $100,000. Now, many of the attorneys that we've been speaking to say the going rate, as you mentioned, coming to me earlier, is around 30 to 40%. And these are very prohibitively expensive cases to pursue, especially when you're going up against a behemoth like Uber, for instance. I want you to take a listen to some of the people that I spoke to today. I spoke to an alleged victim here. Her name is Ariane Rollins. She says she got into an Uber. When she got into that Uber, the Uber driver then canceled the ride. However, then said, "I will take you home anyway." He placed his hand on her thigh, would not let her get out of the car. She then struggled to remove herself from the vehicle, was finally able to extricate herself after some time from the vehicle. Upon filing a complaint with Uber, she says, they gave her back her $8, but then did nothing else. So she sought out counsel from a lawyer, hence finally filing a lawsuit. You're also going to hear from her attorney, Tracy Cowan, along with Sarah London, an attorney representing multiple clients against Uber. Let's take a listen.
I used to call an Uber once or twice a day to get me to work, to get me to go to a friend's house. And those are things that I've now had to reconsider or not pursue at all because I'm fearful.
If you, Ariane, were told that you could not gain representation unless you paid for it upfront, would this be something that would be prohibitively expensive for you to pursue?
Absolutely. I wouldn't be here today.
I would probably not be able to pursue cases like this if they originated in Nevada. And that is exactly what Uber is counting on, right? It wants people who've been injured on its platform not to be able to find legal representation.
This is about Uber really rigging the game in its favor. If we cannot afford to take on these big, giant companies, they will only make more and more money at everybody's expense.
So we didn't get a specific response to Ariane's allegations from Uber. We did, though, get a statement from Uber on this story and this initiative inside Nevada saying this: Uber is committed to doing the right thing, which is why we were the first in the industry to eliminate forced arbitration for survivors of sexual assault, making it easier for them to take us to court. The ballot initiative is consistent with those goals by ensuring Nevada plaintiffs are not taken advantage of by TV attorneys. So essentially making the argument that they're doing this because they feel as if some of these attorneys are taking advantage of these alleged victims, Tom.
That's really interesting. Yasmin, thank you very much. Original reporting there. Just in the last couple of hours, U.S. gymnast Jordan Childs is speaking for the first time since Olympic officials stripped her of the bronze medal in the floor final, awarding it to a Romanian gymnast. Childs calls the decision unjust in an online post and hits back on the attacks she's gotten since she was stripped of the medal. Now, she says the unprompted, racially driven attacks on social media are wrong and extremely hurtful. Right now, Romania is preparing to hold a ceremony tomorrow for the new bronze medalist. But U.S. Olympic reps are not done fighting for Jordan's medal, reiterating to NBC News that they're planning an appeal. We bring in now Emily Aketa for more on this. Emily, why would Romania go through with a medal ceremony when it feels like this isn't resolved? Are they trying to push their narrative even further?
There's definitely a long road ahead. And when we reached out to Romanian gymnastics officials for comment, they pointed out and reiterated that in their appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, they had asked that Jordan Childs be allowed to keep her bronze medal in addition to awarding their Romanian gymnast as well. So it kind of seems like maybe they are seeing these as two separate situations. And meantime, the U.S., as you have mentioned, they still have an avenue for an appeal, a higher international court that they could pursue. And we continue to hear from USA Gymnastics, from U.S. Olympic officials, and now from Jordan Childs herself that they are gearing up for a fight. She released a statement on social media, posting to Instagram this afternoon that reads in part, "I am now confronted with one of the most challenging moments in my career. I believe at the end of this journey, the people in control will do the right thing." She also talks about the heartbreak. She called the news of learning that she was going to be stripped of her bronze medal, her first individual medal event for an individual event. She called it devastating, while also thanking the support from her loved ones, her friends, her teammates as well. The other thing that we're learning about from U.S. Olympic officials, a little bit of more insight into what was the lead up to the hearing that happened over the weekend. The U.S. Olympic officials, in a statement that says, CAS sent crucial communications to erroneous email addresses, an error not corrected until August 9th, which was less than 24 hours before the hearing. This deprived us of adequate time to respond meaningfully or gather necessary evidence. Remember, they talked about since gathering that timestamp video that shows the coach had filed an appeal within the 1-minute deadline, Tom.
Okay, Emily, thank you. A triple play of good economic news is hitting the markets today. A new consumer spending report shows retail sales jumped 1% in July, and that beat expectations. And strong jobs numbers are showing unemployment claims dropped by 7,000 from last week. All of that data is adding to recent data that shows slowing inflation, has Wall Street posting green arrows today. The Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ up. All of them up around 1.5%. NASDAQ up more than 2%. Those numbers are surpassing the day before that August dip that we covered. Investopedia editor-in-chief Caleb Silver joins me now to break all of this down. Caleb, the most recent consumer confidence numbers here, well, they were at an 8-month low, but retail spending is up. So how do you square that circle?
Yeah, we feel bad about the economy. We feel bad about high prices and this persistent inflation, but it hasn't stopped our spending. As you mentioned, retail sales coming in very strong. Walmart out this morning reporting quarterly results very strong across the boards. And by and large, we're hearing very good profit reports from public companies, and that's kind of why you see the stock market doing so well. Plus, that softer than expected unemployment claims, the better than expected inflation report with softening of inflation. All this is good news and empowering investors to take more risk in the stock market.
All right, so what's your tea leaf read here? Because number one, have we avoided a recession? Are we looking at a soft landing? And secondarily, how much do you think the Fed may cut when they reconvene in September?
Yeah, September 18th is that date, and the plan was for them to cut 0.25% and start bringing interest rates down very slowly. The thing about recessions, and you know this, Tom, you don't know you're in one until you're in one, or you've already passed through it. But right now, the signs are good. If consumer spending holds up and we don't get too big of a rise in unemployment, and we got a little one back in July, then I think we avoid a recession, and that's why you're seeing this enthusiasm both in the economy right now and in the stock market, even though consumers are still feeling weighed down by high prices.
Yeah, cautious, but things are still moving in the right direction. Caleb, thank you very much. Caleb Silver. Coming up, the new charges for parents accused of trying to cure their child's life-threatening injuries with smoothies. Plus, Ukraine is pushing deeper into Russia tonight. The latest on the dramatic shift in that region coming up. We're back, and tonight Ukraine is pushing its way deeper into Russian territory, capturing dozens of towns in the Kursk region, part of the largest cross-border attack since Russia invaded Ukraine, and the only invasion of foreign troops on Russian territory since World War II. Now look at this. Russian troops are digging trenches, scrambling to fend off Ukraine's surprise incursion. The Ukrainian military says it's in control of almost 400 square miles of Russian territory and has taken more than 100 Russian prisoners of war. But a week after the invasion, Ukraine's ultimate goal is still unclear. Will it try to keep the conquered territory, advance further into Russia, or pull back? Former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, is joining us now. Ambassador, for over 2 years, you know, Ukraine has been on the defense, and now it seems to be on the offense, at least on this front, which is not only a shift, but a gamble, right? So what do we know? What's your guess about Ukraine's strategy here?
I think the biggest thing they wanted to do is change the narrative. Look at what we're talking about right now. We're talking about Ukraine going on the offensive. Ukraine now has captured more Russian territory in 2024 than Russia captured in all of 2024 in Ukraine. And that's exactly what they want us to talk about. Second, and this I think is the most important thing, they want to bring this war to Russia to create a debate inside Russia about the utility of keeping this war going. Now, there's not free press there. There's not democratic elections. So it's going to have a different feel inside Russia. But you can see it on websites and news and among elites and people I talk to personally. People are asking, if Putin is such a strong leader, why are we being attacked for the first time, by the way, since 1941?
Yeah, can that bubble up into real dissent? And you know Putin well. You are persona non grata in Russia right now. Do you think Putin will ever negotiate, or are we looking at a forever war?
It's a really hard question. I've seen no evidence so far that he is interested in negotiating. I think the necessary condition for negotiations is that he has to be stopped on the battlefield. Wars tend to end in two ways. Either one side wins or there's a stalemate. And right now, he still thinks he can conquer more territory. He'll only think about negotiation when he is stopped on the battlefield. And tragically, that hasn't happened yet.
And in your view, you know, I preface this by saying that I heard Khrushchev's great-granddaughter saying that she really worries that this thing is about to blow up. In your view, is there any risk of this war expanding to include NATO and the U.S. in direct combat with Russia?
Is there a risk? Yes. Is it tomorrow? No. But I think framing it that way underscores why we need to help Ukraine stop Russia's army inside Ukraine so that it doesn't get stronger 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. And then Putin takes a chance to see if we're really credibly committed to our NATO allies, countries like Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, that would need our assistance to repel an invasion. So rather than take that chance, we should help the Ukrainians win now so that we don't have to fight the Russians directly later.
To what extent, Ambassador, do you think that this war and how badly it's gone for Russia in particular has really diminished the threat that Russia poses to Eastern Europe and, in fact, Europe as a whole? Should we be as worried about a Russian offensive, in theory, than we were just 5 years ago, 2 years ago?
In the immediate term, no. The Russian army is much weaker. Their economy is much weaker as a result of sanctions. And that means it's that they have less capability to do those kinds of things. But two things worry me. One, if they begin to win and they get more strength, that means that Putin will have more confidence in trying to do these other things. And secondly, we've just seen this pattern with Mr. Putin. The older he's gotten, the more prone to do radical, dangerous kinds of things has occurred, including invading Ukraine in 2022. And therefore, rather than wait for that day, I think we need to give the Ukrainians more weapons and better weapons, impose more sanctions and better sanctions so that they become weaker, not stronger, over the coming years.
Ambassador Michael McFaul, thank you. I always turn up the volume when I see you on TV, Ambassador. Thank you very much. Let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, negotiations on the war in Gaza are picking back up. Mediators from the U.S., from Egypt and Qatar are trying to broker a ceasefire as Palestinian authorities say the death toll in Gaza has passed 40,000. Leaders from Israel are also in Doha, Qatar, but Hamas is not. It's a blow to U.S. hopes of securing a deal that could stop a retaliatory attack from Iran. Number 2, Sweden confirms at least one case of a more contagious version of Mpox. It's the first known case outside of Africa. You'll recall 24 hours ago, the World Health Organization declared Mpox a global public health emergency. Number 3, a mother and stepfather charged with first-degree felonies in the death of their 12-year-old daughter in Texas. She died Monday. A local sheriff's office says the girl suffered from life-threatening injuries days earlier, but her parents failed to get help and instead tried to treat her with smoothies and vitamins until the girl had trouble breathing. Investigators think the couple avoided help to keep law enforcement out of their home. Number 4, Trader Joe's is recalling over 650,000 of its mango-scented candles due to a possible fire hazard. The company says the candle's flame can spread from the wick to the wax, causing a larger than expected flame. There have been over a dozen reports of incidents like property damage and some minor burns. Number 5, Australian breakdancer Rachel Gunn says the hate she's gotten over her routine at the Olympics is devastating. Ray Gunn, as she's known, has gotten a bunch of criticism online after clips of her routine went viral. She says she worked super hard preparing for the games in Paris and is, quote, glad I was able to bring some joy into your lives. Coming up from us, the stunning sentence just handed down to an American ballerina imprisoned in Russia. That's coming up. Stay with us. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and it's pretty tough to read, watch, or listen to everything. So our teams around the world have done it for you and me. Here's a look at what they're watching, and we call it the global. In Russia, a court has sentenced a U.S. ballerina, a Russian ballerina, to 12 years in a penal colony for high treason. She allegedly transferred funds to a Ukrainian charity at the start of the war, a very small amount of money there. Her defense lawyer says they're trying to appeal the decision, though. Again, a U.S.-Russian national, and her attorneys say, working towards a prisoner swap. Out of Italy, some pretty stunning videos showing Mount Etna erupting at dawn today. The volcano spewing so much lava and ash. At one point, it caused flight disruptions at the nearby airport. In the United Kingdom, thousands of fans are flocking to Wembley Stadium as Taylor Swift is giving her first of 5 performances in London. This comes after her last shows in Vienna were canceled because of a terror plot targeted for the event. Remember, security authorities have ramped up safety protocols today with even more guards around the venue. No one is allowed to party outside of the stadium. Now to tonight's original with in-depth reporting on a topic we watch closely. And tonight, it's the fight over repaying Black Americans for past discrimination. Back in 2021, Evanston, Illinois, became the first city in the U.S. to give Black Americans reparation payments. But now that program may be in jeopardy. A conservative group is suing the city, calling the program unconstitutional. NBC's Yamiche Alcindor spoke with a family benefiting from that program and with some folks who want to see the program gone.
Tonight, just north of the Democratic National Convention, residents in Evanston, Illinois are gearing up for a legal fight over the nation's first reparations program. It's a program that residents like 87-year-old Dolores Holmes say is righting historic wrongs.
We bought this house in 1961. You know, we couldn't get a mortgage because the banks wouldn't give you mortgages.
The banks wouldn't loan you money. Why?
Because you're Black. What else? What else? You have jobs, you're working, you could pay it.
Decades ago, like many Black people, Holmes says she and her family were pressured and limited to buying property in the city's 5th Ward. It was a crowded, segregated neighborhood with less valuable land than areas on the shores of Lake Michigan. And banks often refused to loan money to Black families like hers. Today, nationwide, just 45% of Black Americans own their homes, compared with 74% of white Americans, according to the U.S. Census Bureau.
When you think about what could have been, what comes to mind?
Well, the first thing is I would have loved to own this whole block instead of having someone who didn't even live in our community who bought it and developed it. Why couldn't we have done that?
But that dream was stopped.
Absolutely.
You think it's because of racism?
Absolutely.
Since 2021, 193 Black residents of the city have received a one-time $25,000 reparations payment. Evanston is now preparing to defend that program in court. The conservative group Judicial Watch is suing the city on behalf of 6 non-Black residents. They argue the program is unconstitutional because it excludes people based on race.
They're using race discrimination to stop the generalized effects of race discrimination in the past. And that's not the way to do it. It generates division, resentment, and it's unlawful.
And what's the best way to do it then?
The best way to do it is to stop race discrimination, treat people according to their merit, enforce a colorblind constitution.
Judicial Watch told us the families they're representing are not doing interviews.
Hopefully this lawsuit and the issues that we're raising here will give pause to others who are pursuing reparations programs and trying to develop them elsewhere.
We must be as targeted in the redress as we were in the oppression and in the discrimination.
Former Evanston Alderman Robin Ruth Simmons chairs Evanston's Reparations Committee.
We also feel very confident of the constitutionality of our initiative.
What's your reaction to the lawsuit now trying to stop the reparations program in this city?
My reaction is this is a bunch of crap. They were not put into one particular part of a community, so they don't even have the experience, so they have no idea what this means.
Harm has been acknowledged, but then as quick as it's been acknowledged, you have another group saying, no,
you don't deserve that
you
either.
don't deserve it either.
As the case plays out in court, Dolores' daughter Kimberly and grandson Nico plan to use their reparations payments to make Dolores' dream a reality.
We're talking about adding an additional dwelling unit on the property, which could generate more income and more generational wealth.
And you're able to use the land and build on it in a way that your mother couldn't.
It makes it emotional because we're doing the things that she wanted to do. My mother always wanted to buy property and buy the block, and we're doing it.
Other places like nearby Chicago and Tulsa, Oklahoma, are now looking into starting reparations programs. And the Democratic Party also lists establishing a national commission to study reparations as part of its platform. Back to you.
All right, Yamiche Alcindor, thank you very much. Coming up, we're learning late today that suspects have been detained in connection to a General Hospital actor's death. More on that when we come back. Breaking news, we're learning tonight that several suspects have been detained in connection in the murder of a popular actor from General Hospital. Johnny Wachter, you may know from that hit role on the show. General Hospital was shot after confronting three men who were trying to steal his catalytic converter from his car. We are continuing to watch this developing story. We'll get you the names of the suspects and their relationships as soon as we have them. A shakeup to tell you about in the real estate industry that could mean big changes for consumers on both sides of a real estate transaction. That's because new rules take effect on Saturday following the settlement of a class action lawsuit involving the National Association of Realtors. And it will change the way real estate agents get paid when you buy or sell a home. Buyers will need to sign contracts with an agent before the agent can show them any properties. Sellers will decide whether they want to cover the cost of an agent fee for buyers. And broker compensation offers will not be posted with the home listing. Taking a drink of water. Some say this could actually lower commissions and even some home prices. CNBC's senior real estate correspondent Diana Olick is here to help us make sense of it all. I need some water after all of that, Diana. This is all part of that big NAR legal settlement, right? So what is it designed to do for the consumer?
Well, so, Tom, it's designed to give the consumers more clarity about what they are and, importantly, are not paying in commissions when buying or selling a home. So for buyers, if they're using a buyer's agent, they will now have to sign an agreement with them up front. And if the seller doesn't agree to pay the buyer's agent, then the buyer will have to pay themselves. And that'll add to costs and factor into what they can and can't afford. Now, for higher-end buyers, probably doesn't mean that much. It's really the first-time buyers, those on the edge of being able to afford a home. They'll take a hit. If the buyer can't afford to pay an agent commission, then they may decide not to use an agent. That could hurt them. It could open them up to being preyed upon. They may not understand things like contingencies and inspections, appraisals, closing costs, all the things that an agent is there to help them with. Now, for sellers, it means they don't necessarily have to pay the buyer agent's commission, and that just saves them money. Tom?
Okay, so then that leads to my question. Could it actually lower home prices, as some have suggested?
Well, so there is an argument to be made to that, because if you look at the math, in the past, sellers usually had to pay the full 6% commission. So say you're looking at a $500,000 home, that's about $30,000. So some think it'll lower the prices because if you're not factoring in half of that commission, then you could lower the price by that much, right? Lower it by $15,000 if you're not paying the buyer agent's commission. But agents I spoke with, they don't actually agree with that. There are so many other things right now that are factoring into sale prices. Number one being, of course, interest rates. And then there's the fact that more supply is coming onto the market, which gives sellers less of an advantage. And prices are already overheated. So when you think about that possible buyer agent commission, it really doesn't weigh in as much as all the other factors that are weighing on the housing market right now.
When I sell a house or buy a house, can I put you on retainer because you seem to have all the answers right at your fingertips, and I need.
Well, we'll
I need
have
them.
to negotiate an agreement, won't we, Tom?
Sure. Okay. I'll check with you on your rate.
Under the new rules.
Diana,
I don't have to
thank
get a
you very
license.
much. Okay. Good. All right. Still to come. Turns out celebrity endorsements do influence elections. How much? Stick around for our breakdown. Busy day. We're coming back. We're back, and candidates across the political spectrum have been relying on them for decades. We're talking about celebrities as politicians seek to highlight star power at their campaign events. But can those endorsements do any good more than just generating buzz? Do they actually increase voter turnout? A new study looks into that very thing. Rahema Ellis has the story for us in tonight's breakdown.
Megan Thee Stallion performing at Vice President Harris's rally in Atlanta. Coconut. Charlie XCX calling Kamala brat after her new hit album. That shout-out went viral. On the other side, at last month's Republican National Convention, Kid Rock and Hulk Hogan taking the stage for former President Trump.
Say fight! Enough was enough!
But do these celebrity endorsements actually make a difference? A new Harvard study shows they do.
It really is a very powerful thing to have a celebrity get involved.
For example, in 2018, Taylor Swift shared a single Instagram post with her then 112 million followers endorsing Democratic candidates and linking them to vote.org. 72 hours later, there were 250,000 new voter registrations. Does that translate into actual votes?
Yes, we do see an increase in voter participation amongst these specific registrants.
But it's not just for specific candidates. It impacts political and civic engagement overall, too. As Americans rank behind other developed democracies around the world, 31 out of 50 in terms of voter turnout, according to a Pew Research report.
We did find that these individual celebrities are being really thoughtful to really help reach young people and help them understand the voting process, the deadlines, where to find their polling place, even what to wear to the polls.
Celebrities stumping for political candidates, not a new phenomenon.
Everyone is voting for Jack.
Frank Sinatra putting out this campaign song for JFK in 1960.
He is the one.
Nearly 50 years later, Oprah supporting Barack Obama. It can take more than star power to move voters. Hillary Clinton had plenty of celebrity backing in 2016.
We have to get out and make sure we vote.
In the days leading up to the election, basketball superstar LeBron James joined her in Cleveland at one of her final rallies. Clinton went on to lose Ohio by 8 points and the election. And it's not always about positive attention. Even before Vice President Harris was the Democratic candidate, A-list actor George Clooney joined the groundswell of calls for Joe Biden to step out of the race, even after backing and hosting multi-million-dollar fundraisers for him. While most of Hollywood historically leans more liberal, some other high-profile Trump supporters include Jon Voight, Roseanne Barr, and Amber Rose, who also spoke at the RNC.
The left told me to hate Trump, and even worse, to hate the other side, the people who support him.
The Harvard study emphasizes that perceived authenticity is key to an endorsement mattering.
Specifically, young people are mistrustful of elected officials and institutions. That does not actually apply to celebrities.
Our media diet has changed and the different modes of communication, meeting voters where they are, and all of those endorsements could end up mattering.
Something to keep in mind with polls still close, as we expect the Democratic National Convention in Chicago to be star-studded.
Not everyone's a political expert, so sometimes an average voter wants to take cues from who to actually support an election. Sometimes it can be a neighbor, sometimes it can be a friend, and often it's a celebrity.
Rahema Ellis, NBC News.
That is a wrap for this hour. Rahema Ellis there in New York. As for us, we're back right now on News Now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.